Initialize sequence.
Welcome to The Baldcast, a production of John Canzano's Bald-Faced Truth.
Well, I am live from Atlanta. I appreciate everybody who is making this show part of their day. This is my first ever live broadcast on YouTube, so please bear with me. But look, we have a lot to talk about. Oregon and Indiana are here. They're in this city behind me. They will be playing a football game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium just down the street from where I am, about 24 hours from now. There's some drama to get into on the Oregon front. I want to unpack some of the important storylines that are going on. I wrote a column today from Atlanta. You can read it at johncanzano.com. I appreciate everybody who reads me there. It means so much to me, and it means so much to me that you're here. Please share this broadcast with others. If you've got friends or family who would enjoy it, shoot them a text, send them the link, let them know, hey, Canzano, that bald guy's live right now from Atlanta doing something new. Anything could happen on this broadcast. But I want to get into a little bit of the drama that has unfolded here in the last 24 hours. Oregon and Indiana both arrived here in Atlanta roughly the same time. Obviously, Oregon had a longer trip getting here to Atlanta, and Oregon, as you know, and Indiana, as you know, they're led by football coaches who are control freaks. Curt Cignetti, Dan Lanning, they want to control every minute, every practice, every meeting. There is a lot that Oregon and Indiana get into when it comes to sort of like outlining where they are and how they spend their minutes. They have it really down to the minute. I've seen sort of the itinerary with Oregon at prior road games and looked at it and go, gosh, like they're literally scheduling down to the minute. Well, Oregon left on a Alaska Airlines charter. They had two charters that flew out of Eugene on Wednesday, and Oregon obviously was trying to get one of those charters to Atlanta sooner than the other because both offensive and defensive coordinator Tosh Lupoi and four players on that Oregon roster, two offensive players, two defensive players, were scheduled to be at immediate availability at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. The first availability, Oregon's time slot was set for about 8:45 p.m. Eastern time. Indiana was set to go right after, about 45 minutes later. Well, Oregon's initial flight, or the first plane, was supposed to arrive at about 8:15 p.m. Eastern time. And then it's about a 15-minute bus ride from the Atlanta airport over to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They figured that would have given them time. It was going to be tight, but it would give them time to kind of deplane and hustle over there. Indiana, meanwhile, landed about 90 minutes before Oregon, but they had some downtime, right? The Hoosiers were going to sit around a little bit, then head over to Mercedes-Benz Stadium and do their media availability. Well, what ensued is a little petty, of course, and bowl games tend to get petty. I'll get into that. But also what ensued was kind of funny. It was amusing to me, at least. Probably not to Oregon, probably not to Indiana. But the Peach Bowl representatives who were putting on sort of this media event for Oregon and Indiana and all the player availabilities, the Peach Bowl people, were trying to be very mindful of, hey, Oregon's on a tight schedule. If there's a delay at all, they'll have to flip-flop the teams. But they were ready for any sort of scenario. Traffic, a bus breaks down, they can make an adjustment. Well, what the Peach Bowl people decided to do, because Indiana called and said, hey, we're at the airport, we can come over. The Peach Bowl people said Oregon has just landed. They're on their way over too. And Indiana sort of made the case to kind of slip in front of Oregon at the media availability. Now, it might not seem like a big deal to you. It's not a big deal to me. But one of these teams was set to go at 8:45 and the other is set to go at about 9:30. Indiana was set for that later slot. Indiana moves into that earlier slot. It causes Oregon's offensive and defensive coordinators, plus some key players, to have to be sitting around Mercedes-Benz Stadium for about an hour, which can cause a delay, right? Because you have team meetings, film sessions, stuff like that that's going into the evening, not to mention the fact that coaches just don't like to be thrown off schedule. But Indiana made the case, I guess, to slip in front of Oregon. And so the Peach Bowl organizers who were at the event took down like the Oregon helmet off the main stage, took down all the placards with the players' names, and then said, look, we're going to let Indiana go first. And so all the local TV people who were from like the Eugene or Portland stations had to take their cameras and their tripods down. And then the stations from Bloomington and Indianapolis put theirs up. And then, of course, Oregon heard that they were being bumped, and they were like, no, our flight was not late. We're on time. We're on schedule to make 8:45. And of course, the Peach Bowl people then went, okay, never mind. They took down the Indiana helmet. They took down all the placards from the Indiana players, and they put the Oregon stuff back up. And then, of course, there was a little bit of a race, because Oregon's bus knew that if it got to Mercedes-Benz Stadium before the Indiana bus, that there would be, the Oregon would go on at 8:45 as scheduled. And Indiana is obviously driving to the airport, or driving from the airport to the venue. And so these two bus drivers were in a little bit of a race. You talk about, the football game, what matters? Offense, defense, special teams. The two bus drivers mattered yesterday as they were sort of racing to get to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Indiana arrived a couple of minutes in front of Oregon. Now, this causes a problem because the Peach Bowl representatives were not going to make Indiana sit. They probably should have just said, no, we're going to stick to the original schedule. But sometimes the PR people, the media relations people, these bowl games, they operate from a position of, what's the path of least resistance? I don't want to get in trouble. And so they let Indiana take the stage. Oregon showed up on time and was told, hey, you're going to have to wait 45 minutes to an hour. Indiana's going first. Now, this, of course, caused a problem. Oregon wasn't happy about it. There were some bad feelings. And, of course, I think Dan Lanning will probably use this as motivation, right? Coaches are always looking for disrespect. Oh, they dissed us. Whatever. Again, many of us were like, okay, much ado about nothing. But this mattered in Oregon's world. And, Tosh Lapoya, the Oregon defensive coordinator, was standing at the back at the Indiana news conferences with his arms folded, kind of watching the whole scene, stood there the whole time. And a couple of the TV reporters in Portland noticed it and said, hey, Tosh was not happy about this. Well, Tosh eventually got to the stage, which was interesting because if you're an Oregon fan, you know that, Lapoya's juggling duties. He's got a lot going on. And of course, he got up on the stage and he was fine after that. Here's
just absolutely wonderful. Yeah, it's been so awesome. What a great time to have the portal open right now. Makes a whole lot of sense. So been great. Get about right around 3.5 hours of sleep a night. And one thing I'm not going to do is lack any preparation that I owe to our team and our family here. So that's not going to happen. So, it's incredible, going through and managing, and then as a competitor, there's things that settle in at times, whether it's guilt of what am I giving the staff, at the University of California, Berkeley, and the proper attention there, or the players and the players on roster, guys, and whether it's great players, great individuals. It's like, going into the portal and I've never met them, I've never literally, how could I? We're prepping for, and attempting to play for a national title here. And so you do your best via FaceTime in between meetings and practice and preparation for the opponent. But also, making sure that we're not having any form of a lack of preparation for the number one goal and task at hand and to beat Indiana.
A little bit irked, right? You can hear it in his voice, but he's talking too about, the calendar of college football. And that's something that I think has got to change. Like, you look at the calendar that Oregon is on in Indiana, and certainly on the other side of the bracket, Miami and Mississippi are on the same calendar, and they're dealing with an open portal. They're dealing with coaching changes. The mess at Ole Miss is, Lane Kiffin's in the middle of it, but it's caused in part by the calendar being off. And I expect that to change. You're hearing a lot of talk about it, but Tosh being sarcastic there at the beginning, saying this has been wonderful. Like, the portal's open. He's trying to recruit a roster at Cal, his new job. He's trying to coach Oregon to the best of his ability. You've got players on the Oregon roster who are jumping into the portal. You've got, Dan Lanning and Kurt Signetti both hosting recruits that are in the portal and trying to get guys signed for next year while finishing this year. In no sport would you see this. This is unprecedented. The NFL would never let this happen. The NFL has a calendar. Major League Baseball's got a calendar. There's a rhythm to the season. It's among the many problems that college football has because it's been mismanaged to this point. Lapoya, though, a little bit irked. You can hear in his voice. He was fine during the availability, but I kind of wonder how Oregon will use this. Dan Lanning has, used different forms of disrespect in his seasons at Oregon to kind of shape the message in his pregame message. And he used a little bit of Merchant of Venice, a little bit of Shakespeare last week against Texas Tech. He did that whole pound of flesh retribution speech that, could have been stolen right out of Shakespeare. But here's Lanning in my Monday interview. I went one-on-one with Lanning. If you missed it, grab it on the YouTube channel. But at the end of the interview, I asked Lanning sort of, how special it is to be among the last 4 teams standing out of 136 teams in Division I football. There are 4 left standing. How special is that? It's not Ohio State. It's not Georgia. It's not Alabama. It's Oregon and Indiana. I mean, which tells you that a lot has changed in college football. But I asked Lanning about that. And then right before we got disconnected on our video interview, I said to him, what will be the message this week? I will not be surprised if the airport fiasco with Indiana cutting the line becomes part of that, part of his message. He's always looking for something to seize on. But here's Lanning and his response to how special it is for Oregon to be among the last 4 teams standing.
Yeah, it's special. Was there 134 teams in Division I football?
Yeah.
So it's special. It's unique. A lot of people will coach their whole career and never be in an opportunity like this. Something you certainly want to take care of and take advantage of. Put all your chips on the table, see how it plays out. You're playing good teams, right? It doesn't always go the way you want. So you try to make sure that you're controlling everything you can control to have success.
You got any more Shakespeare you're going to quote this week or onto something new?
Time will tell.
Time will tell, he said. I won't be surprised if his messaging includes a little bit of this. We'll have to see how that goes. Do I think that stuff matters? I guess. It shouldn't be the ultimate motivating factor. If you're Oregon, you're excited to play in this game. You're playing against an opponent that gave you your only loss of the season. That Indiana win at Autzen Stadium. I can remember driving away from that game in late September and thinking to myself, gosh, Indiana was better. Indiana was better that day. Kurt Cignetti's team was peaking and playing better football and made the plays in the fourth quarter to take what was a 20-20 game and make it 30-20. And Indiana won that game decisively. And then I remember being in the press box and looking down at the field during the game and at the end of the game, and I Indiana players were celebrating. And the Indiana band came onto the field. And they were standing at midfield. They were playing the school fight song. And a lot of the Indiana fans who came to Eugene that day climbed down out of the stands at Autzen Stadium and made their way to the middle of the field where they were sort of milling around the players and taking photos. And it really reminded me, there was a little bit of correlation or symmetry, or maybe it just rhymed with Oregon's win over Ohio State a year earlier. It was a year to the day, in fact, that Ohio State came to Autzen Stadium and Oregon won. And I remember at the time writing, it was a catharsis, right? It was a breakthrough. It was Dan Lanning, who had failed to beat Washington multiple times, had lost a big game to Oregon State. Can Lanning win the big one was the narrative. And I remember at the end of that game, Will Howard, he slides and Ohio State runs out of time, and all of a sudden Oregon wins a football game. I remember leaving that day. Oregon was very happy in beating Ohio State. Anybody who saw it was a big, big moment for the Oregon program. Very validating. Now, it wasn't like Oregon hadn't had big wins before. Oregon had won in Columbus. I was there when Mario Cristobal and the Ducks won in Columbus. But it was something for this Dan Lanning era, who had, Lanning had bumped his head against the ceiling a couple times against Kalen DeBoer. And it was a breakthrough moment. And so real catharsis that day, a lot of emotion. Anybody watching it, if you'd woken from a coma, you would have thought to yourself, Oregon just won a national championship. That's how much excitement and how much celebration was going on the field that day. Indiana had that same feel earlier this season. And it feels like it was just so long ago that game was played. But Indiana was better that day. And it leads me into another thought that I've been having here in the last 36 hours as we approach, we're like a day away from kickoff. Oregon, all the last couple of weeks, has felt to me like a team that, was capable of getting to the semifinals, but maybe not winning it all. And yet there's something about Dan Lanning's sort of demeanor. There's something in my gut. There's something about the growth that I have seen from the young players on Oregon's roster. Keep in mind, Oregon is a much younger team than Indiana. It is a big disadvantage in this era where coaches are all trying to get older in the portal. Indiana's starting a 23-year-old quarterback who won the Heisman. They got a 24-year-old running back. The other running back's 23. The best wide receiver's 22. You've got old players who are leading this Indiana team, very experienced. It's a huge advantage. Oregon's playing with a 20-year-old Dante Moore. They're playing with a wide receiver and defensive backs, true freshmen who are 18 and 19. You've got another player who's 20 who is a key receiver. You've got both your tight ends. Your best two tight ends at Oregon are both 20. This is a very roster that I've felt for a while is getting to this semifinal stage maybe a year early, except this week I started to kind of think about the advantages of being young. We think about it as a disadvantage in most cases. The advantage of being young is what? You've got more growth potential. You, as a young player, you're going to have bigger gains from maybe your week 3 game as your freshman year to, your week 13 game in your freshman year than maybe you would have in that same span as a junior or a senior. And I think if you're an Oregon fan trying to build a case for the Ducks winning this game, you're leaning heavily on two things. One, that there has been more growth from this Oregon team from the last meeting. And the second one is that Oregon may have played that first game in a little bit of a vanilla game plan. And I have wrestled with this, and I haven't, out and out written it. I haven't said it because I don't think Dan Lanning would take kindly to the insinuation that they threw a game. I don't think they threw a game. I think Indiana beat them. I think Oregon was trying to win that day. But I actually think Oregon was okay maybe losing one. And Tosh Lupoi talked about it. He said that, they pretty much threw a party when they realized they were the 5 seed. And, when there was some talk, right? When the selection committee was meeting that last time that Oregon might be a 4 seed and get a bye. Oregon didn't want to bye. Oregon wanted to play. The Ducks held this pseudo scrimmage game where they tried to simulate a game, even though they had, an opening round game with James Madison. Oregon was very interested in keeping on rhythm, keeping in schedule, trying to play games. As coaches will tell you, there's a rhythm to all things. You lose that rhythm, you lose players. They get distracted, they wander off. Anybody who's got kids, and I have 3, you understand. Like, you want to keep your team focused and locked in. So I think as you try to start to build a case for Oregon maybe making up ground on Indiana since their first meeting, it starts with the idea that, the young players are going to have more growth. And maybe Oregon did play that game a little bit close to the vest, a little vanilla. Or maybe it was kind of a Super Bowl moment. I talked to Rhett Lewis, a former Indiana player, a couple days ago, and he's a sideline reporter for the Big Ten Network. He's on Sirius XM. He's the biggest Indiana honk in the media contingency. And I asked him, kind of about that breakthrough win at Autzen. What did it mean? And he lit up, right? Because it was a big validating moment for Indiana in the same way that Oregon bringing Ohio State to Autzen and beating them was a year earlier. We all saw how different that second time was. We also know that in the CFP era, there have been, 5 meetings of teams that played each other twice. And 4 of those times, the team that lost the first game came back and won the second game. The only exception being the Tulane, Mississippi game that was in the first round of these playoffs. So I think there's some evidence here for Oregon winning it. And, I made my picks at johncanzano.com. I'm doing really well in the playoff games. I'm 7-1 against the spread in these CFP games. But I went to make my pick on this Oregon-Indiana game, and my brain and everything on paper is telling me that Indiana wins this game, but there is something in my gut that tells me Oregon's going to make this a 1-score game and have the ball and have a chance to win it at the end. There's just something about the way Dan Lanning was carrying himself. There's something about the way that maybe they were okay dropping one and being the 5 seed. I think that there is a rhythm to this season. Oregon learned from last season, right? And the way they face planted in the postseason, they were terrible. It was embarrassing. I felt so bad for all those Duck fans who went to the Rose Bowl and saw that game and saw them get, just pile driven by Ohio State. But, I'll give Dan Lanning some credit. Like, I haven't seen him make the same mistake twice. And I do think there's something about this second matchup with Indiana that feels very different to me. I picked the Ducks. I even went as far to say it's an Atticus Sappington field goal, walk-off field goal at the end. I have it something like 24-23, 24-21, something like that. I think it's low scoring. I think points are hard to come by. Will not be surprised if this is like a 10-10 game at halftime. It just got that feel. I think it's going to be very tight. I think possessions matter. I do think Dan Lanning needs to take points. He needs to kick field goals. It's so against his nature. He's been reluctant to do that to this point. We all know that. I am in the press box going, take the points, take the points. He doesn't seem to want to take the points, and I think part of that can be explained by the fact that Lanning maybe still views himself as playing the game rather than coaching the game. I think that's another area of growth that's going to have to improve in him if he's going to win these games, because I think every point's going to matter in all these games now at the end of the season. Fernando Mendoza also spoke at Media Day. Keep in mind, Indiana went first. He was very happy. Indiana's players and coaches were in a good mood. Here's Mendoza talking about Oregon's defense.
Oregon's defense, their D-line is playing incredible. We played them week 5, and at that point, we were able to get the best of them, entirely. However, they put up a great fight. They had a pick 6 on us, and watching them against Texas Tech, a shutout in a college football playoff game is insane. So it's going to be a great challenge.
Big challenge for Mendoza, the Heisman winner. He did throw a pick 6, as he mentioned, in that first matchup with Oregon. They made him a little uncomfortable. I want you, as you're watching the game, to keep your eye on the eyes of the two quarterbacks. Before I cut you loose here, I'm going to give you that key. Keep your eyes on the eyes of those quarterbacks. Dante Moore, Oregon's quarterback, had his eyes down in that first matchup. He got sacked, remember, on the very first play from scrimmage. He got sacked. That Indiana defensive front gave him problems. He had receivers open, but his eyes were down. I noticed he was looking at the defensive ends. He was looking at the tackles. The pass rush seemed to be on him in an uncomfortable way. That is a key to the game. Similarly, I think Fernando Mendoza, Oregon made him a little uncomfortable. So keep your eye on how the quarterbacks look, the comfort level, their eyes, where are their eyes? For those of you who haven't been to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Oregon was here in Dan Lanning's first game. He lost 49-3. It is a giant venue. I'm going to give you a little look at it here. That was played, a year ago, or LSU, Georgia, and you can see sort of the walk up to the stadium. It looks a little bit like a spaceship. You'll see it on TV. You'll mostly see the inside, but it gives you a little look at the stadium and what fans of Oregon and Indiana can hope to expect and see as the Ducks take on Indiana in this big game. I want you to make sure that you subscribe to this YouTube channel. Appreciate you bearing with me here and getting through this very first broadcast. I will do more of these. I have some big stuff coming down the pipeline on the Bald Face Truth show front. I'm excited to share with you, but this digital platform and YouTube and doing some live shows will be part of it. So I appreciate you being here. And as always, the Bald Face Truth is not here for a long time, just a good time. Tell me in the comment section who you like in this Oregon-Indiana semifinal game. I said 24-23 Oregon. It's all gut, none of my brains on that one. But I have this feeling about Oregon. I think they're going to Miami. All right, we'll catch you next time.